The dust kicked up in angry swirls around Beatrice Emerson's boots as she stumbled forward, her vision blurring at the edges like an old photograph left too long in the sun. She should have listened to her sister back in St. Louis when Martha warned her that traveling west with nothing but a carpetbag and stubborn determination was a recipe for disaster. But Beatrice had never been one to heed warnings, not when opportunity beckoned from California's goldfields and she had debts chasing her like hungry wolves. The wagon train had left her behind 3 days ago when she could no longer keep pace, the wagon master deciding that one unmarried woman with no family was not worth slowing down the entire company. They had left her with enough supplies for a week and directions to Granite, Montana, supposedly only 15 miles northeast through the valley. That was before the fever started, before her body began betraying her with every step, before the water in her canteen ran bitter and low. The year was 1873, and women did not survive alone in Montana territory, not in the wilderness where the sun beat down mercilessly during the day and the cold crept in like a thief at night. Beatrice knew this, had known it when she set out from Missouri 6 months prior, but knowing something and living it were two entirely different matters. Her legs gave out without warning. One moment she was placing one foot in front of the other, counting her steps to keep her mind focused, and the next she was on her knees in the dirt, her carpetbag tumbling from her fingers. The world spun sickeningly, and she pressed her palms flat against the ground, trying to anchor herself to something solid, something real. The sound of hoofbeats registered dimly in her consciousness, but she could not lift her head to see who approached. Friend or foe, it hardly mattered anymore. She was dying out here, and perhaps that was fitting punishment for her pride, for thinking she could outrun her past and build something new from nothing. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, tinged with concern and entirely unfamiliar. Beatrice tried to respond, but her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, and she was turned over gently, her back now resting against the hard earth. Through the haze of fever, she saw a face hovering above her. Young, weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of the sky just before a storm. Dark hair stuck out from beneath a worn hat, and stubble shadowed a strong jawline. He was saying something, but the words came to her as if through water, distorted and distant. "Fever," he said, and this time the word broke through. "You have got fever. When did you last drink water?" She tried to answer, tried to tell him about the wagon train and the 15 miles to Granite, but darkness was pulling at her, dragging her down into its depths. The last thing she registered was the feeling of being lifted, of strong arms cradling her against a broad chest, and then there was nothing at all. The world came back in fragments. The rhythmic movement of a horse walking, the smell of leather and sweat and sage. A wet cloth pressed against her forehead, blessedly cool. Voices, though she could not make out the words. Someone tilting her head back and dribbling water past her lips, patient and careful. "That is it, drink slow, slow now." She wanted to open her eyes, but they felt sealed shut, weighted down by the fever that still raged through her body. Time lost all meaning. Sometimes she was aware of the horse beneath her, of being held securely in place. Other times she drifted in a gray space where nothing existed except the heat consuming her from within. Once, she surfaced enough to realize she was no longer on the horse. She lay on something soft, a bedroll perhaps, and the arms that had been holding her were tucking a blanket around her shoulders. She tried to speak, to ask where she was, but only a weak sound emerged. "Hush now," the voice said, and she felt a hand brush hair back from her forehead. "You are safe. I am getting you to Granite, but we have to rest the horse. Just rest." The hand lingered for a moment, calloused but gentle, before withdrawing. She heard the sound of a fire crackling, smelled coffee brewing. Her stomach turned at the thought of food, but the scent was comforting nonetheless, a reminder of civilization, of normal life beyond the prison of her fever. "My name is Tucker Dalton," the voice said after a while, as if sensing she could hear him even if she could not respond. "I was heading back to my ranch when I found you. Been tracking strays for the better part of a week. You are lucky I came through when I did, madam. Not many folks travel this route." Lucky. Was that what this was? Beatrice wanted to laugh, but even that was beyond her capabilities. She had been left behind by her wagon train, was burning up with fever in the middle of nowhere, completely dependent on the mercy of a stranger. If this was luck, she would hate to see what misfortune looked like. But he had not left her to die. That had to count for something. She drifted away again, and when awareness returned, they were moving once more. She was in his arms again, held against his chest, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. It was a strange intimacy, one that in normal circumstances would have mortified her, but nothing about her circumstances was normal. "Not much farther," he murmured, and she realized he was talking to her, perhaps had been talking to her all along. "Maybe 5 miles more. Doc Henderson will fix you up right. He is a good man, treated my brother when he broke his leg last winter. You just hang on, you hear me?" She wanted to tell him she was trying, that she was fighting with everything she had left, but the darkness was pulling at her again. This time she went without resistance, trusting that this stranger, this Tucker Dalton, would keep his word. The next time she woke, truly woke, she was in a bed. A real bed with clean sheets and a pillow beneath her head. The ceiling above her was made of rough-hewn wood, and sunlight streamed through a window to her left, painting golden squares across the floor. For a long moment, she simply lay there, taking inventory of her body. The fever had broken. She could feel the difference immediately. The way her thoughts were clear instead of muddled. The way her skin felt cool and dry instead of burning and damp. Her throat was parched, and when she turned her head, she saw a pitcher of water on a small table beside the bed. She tried to sit up, but her muscles were weak, protesting the movement. She managed to prop herself up on one elbow, reaching for the pitcher with a shaking hand. "Let me help you with that." She startled at the voice, nearly knocking the pitcher over. Tucker Dalton rose from a chair in the corner of the room, a chair she had not noticed in her single-minded focus on the water. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, pouring water into a glass and offering it to her. "Slow sips," he cautioned as she reached for it eagerly. The water was the best thing she had ever tasted, cool and clean. She wanted to gulp it down, but she heeded his warning, taking small, careful sips. When the glass was empty, he refilled it without being asked, and she drank again, more slowly this time. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hoarse and rough. "No need for thanks," he said, but he looked relieved, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You gave us quite a scare. Doc Henderson said it was touch and go there for a bit." Now that her immediate thirst was quenched, Beatrice took the opportunity to look at her rescuer properly. He was younger than she had thought during her fevered impressions, probably not more than 25 or 26. His face was honest, open, the kind of face that inspired trust. He wore dusty trail clothes, his shirt rolled up to reveal strong forearms marked with old scars and recent scratches. "How long have I been here?" she asked. 3 days since I brought you to Granite. 4 days since I found you on the trail." He pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, his hat in his hands. "You were in a bad way, madam. The doc said if you had been out there another day, you would not have made it. 4 days. 4 days of her life lost to fever, and this man had stayed with her." The implication of that hit her slowly. "You carried me?" she asked. "The whole way." "My horse carried you most of the way," he corrected, but there was a faint color in his cheeks that suggested he was downplaying his role. 10 miles or so from where I found you to Granite. I just made sure you did not fall off." 10 miles. She tried to imagine it, being held in his arms for 10 miles, completely unconscious and vulnerable, and her own cheeks heated. It was deeply improper, but propriety hardly mattered when measured against survival. "Have you been here the whole time?" She gestured at the chair, noting the rumpled blanket draped over its back, the way it was positioned to give a clear view of the bed. "Doc Henderson has been tending to you," Tucker said, not quite answering the question. "I just wanted to make sure you pulled through. Seemed wrong to leave after hauling you all this way." There was something in his voice, a quality she could not quite identify. Concern, certainly, but something else too. She studied him, this stranger who had saved her life, and felt an odd flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the lingering effects of fever. "I am Beatrice," she said. "Beatrice Emerson. I am sorry for the trouble I have caused you." "No trouble at all, Miss Emerson." He stood, replacing his hat. "I will let Doc Henderson know you are awake. He will want to check on you, and I should see about getting some broth from the boarding house. You need to eat, build your strength back up." He moved toward the door, and Beatrice felt an unexpected surge of panic at the thought of him leaving. He had been her constant companion for 4 days, even if she had not been aware of it, and the room felt suddenly too empty, too quiet with him preparing to go. "Will you come back?" she asked before she could stop herself. He turned, one hand on the door frame, and smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines carved by sun and labor. "Wild horses could not keep me away, Miss Emerson." After he left, Beatrice lay back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over her despite having done nothing but wake up. But beneath the tiredness was something else, something warm and unfamiliar. Tucker Dalton had carried her 10 miles, had stayed by her side for 4 days, and now he promised to return. She had come west running from her past, from debts and obligations, and a life that felt too small to contain her dreams. She had never expected to find herself in the care of a cowboy with kind eyes and gentle hands, had never expected to feel her heart stir at the sight of a smile. Doc Henderson arrived shortly after Tucker left, a portly man in his 50s with spectacles perched on his nose and a professional but warm demeanor. He checked her pulse, listened to her breathing, and pronounced her well on the road to recovery. "You are a fortunate young woman," he said as he packed up his medical bag. "That cowboy found you in the nick of time. He rode that poor horse hard to get you here, never mind that he had been in the saddle for days already. Refused to leave your side once we got the fever down. I had to practically order him to eat. He seems like a good man," Beatrice said carefully. "The Dalton brothers are the best men I know," Doc Henderson said firmly. "Their father was a mean drunk who ran off years back, and their mother died of consumption when Tucker was barely 18. He and his brother Travis have built up that ranch from nothing, honest hard work and determination. You could not have been found by better folk." After the doctor left, Beatrice stared at the ceiling, processing this information. Tucker Dalton was not just kind, he was proven. He had overcome hardship, had built something from nothing, had stayed with a stranger because it was the right thing to do. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Tucker was back, carrying a tray with a bowl of steaming broth and fresh bread. The smell made her stomach growl audibly, and he laughed. "That is a good sign," he said, settling the tray across her lap. "Means your appetite is coming back." She ate slowly, savoring each spoonful. The broth was simple but delicious, seasoned with herbs and thick with vegetables. Tucker sat in his chair, watching her with an expression that was both attentive and oddly content. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Emerson," he said after a while. "What brings you to Montana Territory?" It was a reasonable question, one she should have anticipated, but Beatrice found herself hesitating. The truth was complicated and not entirely flattering, but Tucker had saved her life, had earned her honesty if nothing else. "I was running," she said finally. "From debts, from responsibilities, from a life that felt like it was strangling me slowly. My father died 2 years ago and left nothing but bills. My mother passed when I was young. I have a sister in St. Louis, but she has her own family to worry about. I heard there were opportunities in California, jobs for women willing to work. I thought I could make a fresh start." "And the wagon train left you behind," Tucker said, not a question but a statement. "I got sick," Beatrice said, shame coloring her voice. "I tried to hide it, but the fever hit hard one morning. The wagon master said they could not wait, that they had a schedule to keep. They gave me supplies and directions to Granite, said I could catch up once I recovered or wait for another train passing through." "That was cold of them," Tucker said, and there was an edge of anger in his voice. "You do not leave people behind, not out here. The wilderness does not care about schedules." "I do not blame them," Beatrice said, though part of her did. "I was a burden, a single woman with no family, no claim to anyone's protection. They had their own people to worry about." "Still wrong," Tucker insisted. "Out here, we look after each other or we do not survive." They fell into a comfortable silence and Beatrice finished her broth. Tucker took the tray when she was done, setting it aside before settling back into his chair. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Once you are recovered, I mean, will you try to catch up to your wagon train?" Beatrice had been thinking about this very question during the quiet moments between sleep and waking. The honest answer was that she did not know. Her plans had fallen apart the moment the wagon train left her behind. She had no money for passage on another train, no connections in Granite, no prospects beyond the vague hope of eventually reaching California. "I suppose I will have to find work here," she said. "At least until I can save enough for passage west. Is there much call for women's work in Granite?" "Some," Tucker said thoughtfully. "Mrs. Patterson, who runs the boarding house, is always needing help. There is a schoolhouse that might need a teacher come fall, and the general store could probably use another set of hands." He paused, then added, "Or if you are willing, my brother and I could use help at the ranch. We have been managing on our own, but it is a lot of work for just 2 men. Cooking, mending, keeping the house. We could pay fair wages and provide room and board." The offer caught her off guard. It was generous, perhaps too generous, and she looked at him suspiciously. "Why would you offer that? You do not know me." "I know enough," Tucker said simply. "I know you are brave enough to head west on your own. I know you are a survivor, or you would not have made it as far as you did. And I know you need a place to land, at least for a while. We are not fancy folk, Miss Emerson, but we are honest, and we would treat you right." There was no guile in his face, no hidden agenda that she could detect, just honest concern and a practical solution to her problem. It was more than she had any right to expect, and the weight of his kindness pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. "I will think about it," she said finally. "But I appreciate the offer, Mr. Dalton, more than I can say." "Tucker," he corrected. "Just Tucker. And take all the time you need to decide. You focus on getting better first." Over the following days, Beatrice's strength returned slowly but surely. Tucker visited every day, sometimes multiple times, bringing food from the boarding house and news from around town. He told her about Granite, a small mining town that had sprung up 5 years earlier when silver was discovered in the surrounding mountains. The population was maybe 200 souls, a mix of miners, ranchers, and the merchants who served them. He told her about his ranch, about the herd of cattle he and his brother were building, about the land they had claimed and were slowly taming. He spoke of the hard winters and the brief, beautiful summers, of the satisfaction of working the land and building something lasting. Beatrice found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his boots in the hallway outside her room, to the way his face lit up when he saw her sitting up in bed or standing by the window. There was an ease between them that should not exist between strangers, but every hour they spent together talking chipped away at the walls of formality. She learned that he was 26, 2 years older than her own 24 years. That his favorite meal was steak and potatoes, simple food prepared well. That he had learned to read from his mother before she died and treasured the 3 books she had left him, reading them over and over. That he dreamed of one day having enough cattle to supply beef to the mining camps, of expanding the ranch, of building something his mother would have been proud of. In turn, she told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her father who had been a clerk with dreams bigger than his paycheck, about the debts that had piled up after his death. She told him about her sister Martha, who had married a shopkeeper and was raising 3 children in a small house that always smelled like baking bread. She told him about the restlessness that had driven her west, the need to prove she could be more than just another woman waiting for marriage to define her life. "You do not want to marry?" Tucker asked one afternoon, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I did not say that," Beatrice corrected. "I just did not want it to be my only option, my only hope for security. I wanted to make my own way first, to know I could stand on my own 2 feet. "That is admirable," Tucker said, and she could tell he meant it. "Too many folks, men and women both, never learn to stand on their own. They go from depending on parents to depending on spouses, and never figure out who they are in between." By the end of the week, Doc Henderson pronounced her well enough to leave, though he cautioned against strenuous activity for at least another week. Beatrice had made her decision, had known in her heart what she would choose before she even consciously acknowledged it. "I would like to accept your offer," she told Tucker that evening as they sat together in the boarding house parlor, the first time she had been out of her room in days. "To work at your ranch, I mean, if the offer still stands." "It does," Tucker said, and the smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, bright and warming. "My brother Travis will be pleased to meet you, and to have home cooking again. We have been living on beans and bacon for longer than I care to admit." They left for the ranch the next morning. Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner who had been housing Beatrice during her recovery, packed them a basket of food for the journey and gave Beatrice a knowing look that made her cheeks heat. "You be careful out there," the older woman said, though it was unclear if she was warning about the wilderness or about the handsome cowboy waiting with the horses. The ranch was a 2-hour ride from Granite, nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. The house was small but well built, solid logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney rising from one end. There was a barn that had seen better days, a corral with a few horses, and fields stretching out where cattle grazed peacefully. It was beautiful in a raw, untamed way that made Beatrice's throat tight. This was what she had dreamed of without knowing it, space and possibility, and the chance to build something real. Travis Dalton was waiting on the porch, and Beatrice saw immediately the resemblance between the brothers. Travis was a year older, slightly taller, with the same honest face and direct gaze. But where Tucker's eyes held warmth, Travis's held wariness. "So you are the woman my brother rode 10 miles with, and then refused to leave alone for 4 days," Travis said by way of greeting. "Travis," Tucker said, a warning in his voice, "I am just stating facts," Travis said, but his expression softened. "Welcome to our home, Miss Emerson. My brother says you are going to help us get this place in proper order." "I will certainly try," Beatrice said. The inside of the house confirmed Tucker's confession about their housekeeping skills. Dishes were piled in the kitchen, clothes were scattered across chairs, and dust covered every surface. But the structure was sound, the furniture well made if sparse, and Beatrice could see the potential beneath the bachelor chaos. "I will show you to your room," Tucker said, carrying her carpet bag down a short hallway. "It is not much, but it is private." The room was small, barely big enough for a bed, a chair, and a small dresser, but the bed was made with clean sheets and there was a window overlooking the mountains. It was more than she had any right to expect, and far better than the uncertain future she had been facing. That night, she cooked her first meal for the Dalton brothers, simple fare from the supplies they had on hand. But she took care with the preparation, wanting to prove her worth. The men ate with the enthusiasm of those who had been surviving rather than eating well, and the compliments they paid her cooking were genuine and enthusiastic. After dinner, as she washed dishes and Tucker dried, she felt a contentment she had not experienced in years. The work was honest, the company was good, and there was something deeply satisfying about transforming a house into a home. "Thank you," Tucker said quietly as they worked. "For agreeing to stay, I mean. It means more than you know." "I think I am the one who should be thanking you," Beatrice replied. "You saved my life and then gave me a chance at a fresh start. That is no small thing." Their hands brushed as he reached for a wet plate, and the contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with surprise. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Beatrice understood that something had shifted between them, something that went beyond gratitude or friendship. Tucker felt it too. She could see it in the way his breath caught, in the way his gaze dropped to her lips before he deliberately looked away. He cleared his throat, stepping back to put a proper distance between them. "I should check on the horses," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Make sure they are settled for the night." He left quickly, and Beatrice stood alone in the kitchen, her heart beating faster than the simple work warranted. This was dangerous territory. She was here to work to earn her keep, not to develop feelings for her employer. But the heart, she was learning, did not much care about practical considerations. The days fell into a rhythm. Beatrice woke early to prepare breakfast, packed lunches for the brothers as they headed out to work the cattle and mend fences, spent her days cleaning and mending and preparing meals. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way her life in St. Louis had never been. The house began to transform under her care. Curtains she sewed from fabric Travis bought in town softened the harsh edges of the windows. The furniture shone with polish, the floors were swept clean, and the smell of fresh bread filled the rooms. Travis noticed and commented approvingly, but Tucker's praise meant more, his quiet words of appreciation carrying weight beyond their simple meaning. In the evenings, after dinner was cleared away and the dishes were washed, the three of them would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Travis usually whittled, his knife moving with practiced ease over pieces of wood, creating small animals that he would leave scattered around the house. Tucker would read from one of his 3 precious books, his voice carrying in the quiet air, and Beatrice would mend or knit, her hands busy while her mind drifted. It was during these evenings that she began to understand the bond between the brothers, the way they communicated with looks and small gestures, the deep trust born of surviving hardship together. They had raised themselves after their mother died, had built this ranch with nothing but determination and sweat, and they protected what was theirs with fierce loyalty. She also began to notice the way Tucker watched her when he thought she was not looking. The way his gaze would linger on her face as she laughed at something Travis said. The way he would find excuses to stand close to her, to brush against her in passing. The attraction between them was building like a summer storm, and she did not know how to stop it or even if she wanted to. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Travis announced he was riding into town the next morning to deliver cattle to a buyer and would be gone for at least 2 days. Beatrice felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of being alone with Tucker, away from Travis's grounding presence. True to his word, Travis left at dawn the next morning, leaving Beatrice and Tucker to navigate the strange intimacy of being alone together. They were scrupulously proper throughout the day, maintaining careful distance, speaking with exaggerated politeness. But the awareness between them crackled like lightning. That evening, as they sat on the porch, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Tucker set down his book and turned to look at her directly. "Beatrice," he said, and the use of her first name, so rarely spoken between them, made her pulse quicken. "I need to speak plainly with you about something." She set down her mending, giving him her full attention. "All right. These past weeks, having you here, it has been more than just having help around the place. You have made this house a home again. You have brought light and warmth to spaces that have been cold for too long." He paused, struggling for words. "What I am trying to say, badly, is that my feelings for you have become more than those of an employer or even a friend. And if I am misreading the situation, if you do not feel the same, I will respect that, and we will continue on as we have been. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest." Beatrice's heart was racing, her hands trembling slightly. This was the moment where she could be safe, could maintain the boundaries of their arrangement, could protect herself from the risk of caring too much. But safety had never brought her anything but emptiness. "You are not misreading the situation," she said quietly. "I have been fighting my feelings for you since the day I woke up and saw you sitting in that chair, realized you had stayed with me through the worst of the fever. You could have left me with Doc Henderson and gone home, but you stayed. That told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man you are." Tucker's face transformed, hope and joy chasing away the worry that had creased his brow. He stood, crossing to where she sat, and held out his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet until they stood facing each other, mere inches apart. "I want to court you properly," he said. "If you will let me, I want to do this right, give you time to be sure to know your own heart." "I already know my heart," Beatrice said, but she was smiling. "But I appreciate the sentiment. Yes, Tucker Dalton, you may court me." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Then he stepped back, maintaining propriety even as his eyes promised more. "I will make you happy," he said. "I swear it." When Travis returned 2 days later, the shift in the dynamic between Beatrice and Tucker was immediately obvious. Travis looked between them, noted the way they gravitated toward each other, the small smiles they exchanged, and he laughed. "About time," he said. "I was wondering how long you two were going to dance around each other. Watching you both try to pretend you were not smitten was painful." "You knew?" Tucker asked, surprised. "Brother, everyone knew. I am pretty sure the horses knew." Travis clapped Tucker on the shoulder. "I am happy for you both, truly." The courting period that followed was sweet and tentative and filled with discovery. Tucker took Beatrice riding through the valley, showing her the boundaries of the ranch, the places where wild flowers grew thick in spring, the creek where he used to fish as a boy. They talked for hours, sharing histories and dreams and fears, building the foundation of something lasting. He kissed her for the first time on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was gentle and reverent, a promise more than a demand, and when they broke apart, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that this was the man she would spend her life with. 3 months after she fainted from fever on the trail, 3 months after Tucker Dalton carried her 10 miles and refused to leave her side, he asked her to marry him. They were in the kitchen, of all places, Beatrice kneading bread while Tucker was supposed to be fixing a hinge on a cabinet. Instead, he had been watching her work, and suddenly he set down his tools and came to stand beside her. "Marry me," he said, no preamble, just raw honesty. Beatrice looked up, her hands covered in flour, and found him watching her with such love in his eyes that it stole her breath. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, of course, yes." He kissed her then, heedless of the flour that transferred from her hands to his shirt, and she kissed him back with all the passion and promise she had been holding in check. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this," he said. "I could never regret you," she replied. They married in Granite's small church, 6 weeks later on a crisp October morning in 1873. Beatrice wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson helped her sew, simple blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. Tucker wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, his hair freshly cut. Travis stood as witness, and half the town came to celebrate. These frontier folk who understood that joy was to be grasped when it appeared because hardship was never far behind. Doc Henderson gave her away, having become a friend during her recovery, and as he placed her hand in Tucker's, he whispered, "I told you that Cowboy was one of the good ones." The party afterward at the boarding house was raucous and joyful, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. But Beatrice only had eyes for her husband, for the way he held her as they danced, for the promises in his eyes every time he looked at her. They rode back to the ranch that evening, just the two of them, Travis having tactfully announced he would be staying in town for a few days. The house waited for them, warm and welcoming with lamplight glowing in the windows. And as Tucker lifted Beatrice over the threshold, she felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a learning of each other's bodies, a claiming and a surrendering all at once. Tucker was patient and reverent, treating her like something precious, and Beatrice gave herself freely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed they would share for the rest of their lives, and Beatrice traced idle patterns on Tucker's chest. "I came west running from my old life," she said softly. "I thought I was looking for independence, for a chance to make my own way. But what I found was so much better. I found home, I found you." "I found you too," Tucker said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Or you found me. Either way, I am grateful for every moment that led us to each other, even the hard ones." "Especially the hard ones," Beatrice agreed. "If I had not gotten sick, if the wagon train had not left me behind, if you had ridden a different trail that day, we would have missed each other entirely. Then I am grateful for fever and cruel wagon masters and strays that led me through that valley," Tucker said. "Grateful for every twist of fate that brought you into my life." The years that followed were not easy, because life on a Montana ranch in the 1870s was never easy, but they were good years, filled with love and purpose, and the satisfaction of building something together. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Tucker and Travis expanded the herd, bought more land, hired a few ranch hands as the operation grew. Beatrice transformed the house into a true home, adding touches of beauty and comfort wherever she could. In the spring of 1875, their first child was born, a boy they named Thomas after Tucker's grandfather. Tucker cried when Doc Henderson placed his son in his arms, overcome with the weight of new fatherhood and the miracle of creating life with the woman he loved. Beatrice, exhausted but glowing, watched her husband fall in love with their child and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known possible. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, Margaret Rose, with her mother's dark hair and her father's storm-gray eyes. And then another son, Samuel, born in the bitter winter of 1880, fighting his way into the world with a cry that spoke of stubbornness and strength. The house rang with children's laughter, with the chaos of family life, with love in all its messy, complicated glory. Tucker proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching his children to ride and rope, to respect the land and the animals in their care. Beatrice taught them letters and numbers, manners and kindness, passing on the best of what she had learned from her own parents. Travis remained part of their family, unmarried but content, his role as uncle taken seriously and with great joy. He spoiled the children shamelessly, whittling them toys and telling them stories, providing another steady presence in their lives. On a summer evening in 1885, 12 years after Tucker had found Beatrice burning with fever on a Montana trail, they sat together on the porch they had rebuilt and expanded over the years. The children were finally asleep after much protest, and Travis was in town visiting friends. For the first time in what felt like weeks, they had a moment of quiet together. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not found you that day?" Tucker asked, his arm around Beatrice's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Never," Beatrice said firmly. "Because this is the life I was always meant to have, even when I did not know it. Everything before was just finding my way to you." "Still," Tucker persisted, "you had plans, California, independence, making your own way. Do you ever regret not seeing those dreams through?" Beatrice pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "Tucker Dalton, you listen to me. I found everything I was looking for right here. I have independence because you have always treated me as a partner, never as property. I have purpose because this ranch, this family, we have built it together. And I have love, more love than I ever dared hope for. So no, I do not waste time on regret. I spend my time being grateful." Tucker kissed her then, slow and deep, a kiss that still held the power to make her heart race even after 12 years of marriage. When they broke apart, he smiled at her with all the love and wonder of a man who could not quite believe his good fortune. "I am the grateful one," he said. "Every single day, I wake up and cannot believe I get to spend my life with you." "We are both grateful then," Beatrice said, settling back against him. "Both fortunate, both exactly where we are meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, as the mountains turned dark against the fading light, as the familiar sounds of the ranch settled around them like a well-worn blanket. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, one of the horses nickered softly. These were the sounds of home, of the life they had built from fever dreams and desperate circumstances, and a cowboy's refusal to leave a dying woman behind. In the years that followed, their love continued to deepen and grow, weathering the challenges that life inevitably brought. There were droughts that tested their resilience, harsh winters that took livestock, the normal struggles of raising children and running a ranch. But through it all, Tucker and Beatrice faced everything together, their partnership stronger than any obstacle. Thomas grew into a serious young man who took naturally to ranching, learning everything his father and uncle could teach him. Margaret Rose inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's determination, insisting on learning to rope and ride as well as any boy, much to her parents' pride and occasional consternation. Samuel was the wild one, always looking for adventure, keeping his parents on their toes and filling the house with laughter and mischief. In 1890, Travis finally met a woman who captured his heart, a widow named Catherine who moved to Granite with her young daughter. Tucker and Beatrice welcomed her into the family with open arms, delighted to see Travis find the same happiness they had known for so long. Travis built a house on the other side of the property, close enough to still help run the ranch but far enough to give both families privacy. As the century turned and Montana achieved statehood in 1889, the Dalton Ranch became a fixture in the community, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. But more than that, it became known as a place of hospitality and kindness, where travelers could count on a hot meal and a safe place to rest, where neighbors could come in times of trouble and find help without judgment. Beatrice never forgot what it meant to be desperate and alone, to depend on the kindness of strangers for survival. She made sure that no one who came to their door was turned away, and Tucker supported her fully in this, remembering the woman he had found dying on a trail and how easily she could have been passed by and forgotten. They helped countless people over the years, travelers and drifters, families down on their luck, women fleeing bad situations. Some stayed only a night, others for weeks or months until they could get back on their feet. The Dalton Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place of refuge, and Tucker and Beatrice wore that reputation with pride. On their 20th anniversary in 1893, Tucker surprised Beatrice with a trip to St. Louis. It was the first time she had left Montana since arriving 20 years earlier, and the reunion with her sister Martha was tearful and joyful. Martha's children were grown now, some with children of their own, and the sisters spent hours catching up on 2 decades of life. "You look happy," Martha said one evening as they sat together, watching the sun set over the city Beatrice had once called home. "Truly happy. I worried so much when you left, thought you were making a terrible mistake heading west alone." "I was making the best decision of my life," Beatrice said. "I just did not know it at the time. Everything I went through, all the hardship and fear, it led me exactly where I needed to be." After 2 weeks in St. Louis, Beatrice was ready to return to Montana, to Tucker and the children and the ranch. As much as she had enjoyed seeing her sister again, her heart belonged in the mountains now, in the life she had built so far from where she started. Tucker met her at the train station in Granite, and the reunion was everything it should be, passionate and tender and filled with the joy of 2 people who had missed each other deeply. As they rode back to the ranch together, Beatrice looked around at the landscape she knew so well and felt a deep contentment settle over her. "Welcome home," Tucker said, helping her down from the wagon. "Home," Beatrice repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, exactly that." The children ran out to greet her, all 3 of them taller and more grown up than when she left, even though it had only been 2 weeks. They clamored for stories about St. Louis and the presents she had brought, and Beatrice gathered them close, breathing in their familiar scents, feeling the rightness of having them in her arms again. That night, after the children were in bed and she and Tucker were finally alone, she told him about her time in St. Louis, about seeing Martha and meeting her nieces and nephews, about walking the streets of her childhood and feeling like a stranger in a place that had once been her whole world. "It was good to visit," she said, "but I spent the whole time missing you, missing this place. Montana is my home now, has been for 20 years. I belong here with you, with our family." "I am glad," Tucker said, pulling her close, "because I was miserable without you." The house felt empty, even with the children and Travis here. You are the heart of this family, Beatrice, the heart of my life." They made love that night with the passion and familiarity of long partnership. And afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Beatrice reflected on the strange path her life had taken. If someone had told that desperate, fever-sick woman on the trail that 20 years later she would be lying in bed with a husband she loved more than life itself, in a house filled with children and laughter, on a successful ranch in Montana Territory, she would have thought them mad. But life had a way of surprising you, of taking your worst moments and transforming them into blessings you never saw coming. She had fainted from fever on a trail in the middle of nowhere, and a cowboy had refused to leave her behind, had carried her to safety, had stayed by her side until she recovered. And in doing so, he had given her everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dreamed possible. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations, by births and deaths and all the moments in between. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, bringing new energy and ideas to the family operation. Margaret Rose shocked everyone by becoming a teacher, taking over the schoolhouse in Granite, and proving herself as fierce and competent in the classroom as she had been on horseback. Samuel eventually settled down after a wild youth, marrying a quiet girl from town and taking on more responsibility at the ranch. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and chaos and indescribable joy. Tucker took to grandfatherhood with the same enthusiasm he had brought to everything else in life, patient and playful, delighting in watching the next generation grow. Beatrice, now in her 50s, found unexpected pleasure in spoiling grandchildren the way she had never quite allowed herself to spoil her own children, making special treats and telling stories and providing endless patience. Travis and Catherine had children of their own, expanding the family further, and the two houses on the Dalton property rang with the sounds of cousins playing together, of family dinners that stretched late into the evening, of a clan that supported and loved each other through everything life brought. On a spring morning in 1905, 32 years after Tucker found Beatrice on that Montana trail, they sat together on their porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. They were older now, gray-haired and weathered by time and sun, but the love between them had only grown stronger with the years. "Do you remember the first time you brought me here?" Beatrice asked, her hand in Tucker's, their fingers intertwined. "How terrified I was. How uncertain about my future." "I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever met," Tucker said. "Coming west alone, surviving what you did, agreeing to take a chance on a run-down ranch and two bachelor brothers who barely knew how to cook for themselves." "Best decision I ever made," Beatrice said. "Second best, anyway. The best decision was saying yes when you asked me to marry you." "I am pretty sure I am the one who made out better in that deal," Tucker said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "I got a wife who was beautiful and smart and could cook. You just got a sun-burned cowboy with more dreams than sense." "I got the love of my life," Beatrice corrected. "I got a partner who treated me as an equal, who valued my opinions and supported my dreams. I got a man who stayed by my side when he could have easily ridden away. I got you, Tucker Dalton, and I would not trade that for anything in the world." They sat in peaceful silence, watching the sun climb higher, listening to the sounds of the ranch waking up around them. Somewhere inside the house, they could hear grandchildren stirring, the clatter of pots as Thomas's wife started breakfast preparations. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, the sounds of a full and blessed life. "Thank you," Tucker said suddenly. "For everything. For loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me children and grandchildren and more happiness than any man deserves." "Thank you for not riding past me that day," Beatrice replied. "Thank you for stopping, for caring, for refusing to leave me behind. You saved my life in more ways than one." "We saved each other," Tucker said. "That is what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from loneliness, from the belief that we have to face everything alone." As the sun rose fully over the mountains, painting everything in warm light, Tucker and Beatrice Dalton sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built through love and determination, and an unwavering commitment to each other. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal. Their children were grown and settled, contributing to the family legacy in their own ways. Their grandchildren were healthy and happy, full of promise and potential. The land they had worked so hard to tame now provided not just for their family, but for the community around them. And through it all, at the center of everything, was the love between a cowboy who had refused to abandon a dying woman and the woman who had found her home in his arms. In the years that followed, they continued to work the ranch alongside their children and grandchildren, slowing down as age demanded but never fully retiring. They took joy in watching the younger generation take over more responsibility, in seeing their grandchildren grow and eventually marry and have children of their own. On their 40th anniversary in 1913, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Tucker stood to make a toast. His hand shook slightly as he raised his glass, but his voice was strong and clear. "40 years ago, I found a woman dying on a trail in the middle of nowhere," he said. "I did what anyone would do, got her to safety, stayed with her until the danger passed. What I did not expect was that in saving her life, she would save mine right back. Beatrice, you have made every day of the past 40 years an adventure and a blessing. You have given me children and grandchildren, have been my partner in building something lasting, have loved me through good times and hard times alike. I am the luckiest man who ever lived, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." There was not a dry eye in the room as he helped Beatrice to her feet and kissed her gently. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around them, a living testament to the power of love and commitment, and refusing to give up on each other. Beatrice and Tucker lived to see many more years together, growing old gracefully on the land they loved, surrounded by family and the satisfaction of a life well lived. When Tucker finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82 in 1929, Beatrice held his hand, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. She followed him 6 months later, unable or unwilling to be without him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read Tucker and Beatrice Dalton, together forever. Their descendants continued to work the ranch for generations, passing down not just land and livestock, but the story of how it all began. The story of a woman who fainted from fever on a trail in Montana Territory in 1873. The story of a cowboy who stopped when he could have ridden on, who carried her 10 miles to safety, who stayed by her side until she recovered. The story of 2 people who found love in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a legacy that lasted far beyond their years. It became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations, a reminder that the greatest things in life often come from the hardest moments, that kindness matters, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would stand on that porch, looking out at the mountains, and imagine that long-ago day when everything changed, when fate and fever and a cowboy's compassion created a love story for the ages. The ranch itself became a historical landmark eventually, preserved not just as a piece of Montana's ranching history, but as a testament to the pioneers who built lives in the untamed West, to the families who persevered through hardship, to the enduring power of love and partnership. And somewhere, perhaps, the spirits of Tucker and Beatrice Dalton still sat on that porch at sunset, hands entwined, watching over the land and the family they created, content in the knowledge that their love story had been worth every moment, every challenge, every triumph. They had started with nothing but determination, and ended with everything that mattered, a love that transcended time and death, a legacy that would live on long after they were gone. A reminder that sometimes the worst day of your life can become the beginning of the best days you will ever know. Their story was one of survival and salvation, of taking a chance on love when it would have been easier to play it safe, of building something beautiful from desperate circumstances. It was the story of a woman who came west running from her past and found her future, of a man who stopped to help a stranger and found his soulmate, of two hearts that recognized each other, even in the midst of fever and fear. It was, in the end, exactly what it had always been meant to be since that day Tucker Dalton spotted a woman collapsed on a trail and made the choice to stop, to care, to stay. It was a love story, pure and simple and enduring. The kind of love story that reminds us all that we are never truly lost as long as there is someone willing to carry us home, to sit by our side through the darkest hours, to build a life with us in the light that follows. And so the legacy of Tucker and Beatrice Dalton lived on, not just in the land they claimed and the family they raised, but in the example they set of what love could be when two people committed fully to each other and to building something lasting together. Their story became part of Montana's history, part of the great tapestry of the American West, a reminder that behind every successful ranch, every thriving family, every legacy that spans generations, there are often individuals who made choices that seemed small at the time but changed everything. Tucker's choice to stop, to help, to stay. Beatrice's choice to trust, to take a chance, to open her heart. Together, those choices created something magnificent, something that enriched not just their own lives but the lives of everyone who came after them. It was the kind of story that made people believe in fate, in meant to be, in the idea that sometimes the worst circumstances can lead to the best outcomes if we are brave enough to take the opportunities presented to us. The Dalton Ranch continued to thrive well into the 20th century and beyond, always family-run, always honoring the values that Tucker and Beatrice had established in those early years. Honesty, hard work, hospitality, kindness to those in need, and above all, the belief that family and love were worth any sacrifice, any effort, any challenge. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Montana mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, those who lived on the ranch could almost feel the presence of those who had come before, could almost hear the echo of laughter and conversation from that porch where two people had built a life together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one choice at a time. It all started with fever and fate on a dusty Montana trail in the summer of 1873. It all started with a cowboy who refused to ride past someone in need. It all started with 10 miles of carrying a dying woman to safety and 4 days of refusing to leave her side. From those desperate circumstances bloomed a love that spanned decades, a family that grew and thrived, a legacy that reminded everyone who heard the story that love, real love, is worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth building an entire life around. Tucker and Beatrice Dalton proved that truth every day of their 40-plus years together, and their descendants carried that truth forward into the future, generation after generation, keeping alive the memory of how it all began and what it all meant. In the end, their story was not just about them. It was about the enduring power of human connection, about the ways we save each other, about how the hardest moments in our lives can become the doorways to our greatest joys if we have the courage to walk through them.